Welcome, everybody, to DAT Poker Podcast, episode 83. It is September 14th, 2020. I'm your host, Dave Schwartz, alongside our producer, Roscoe P. Coltrane.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Sexton, along with Vince Van Patten, and this is the WPT.
And Terrence Chen in beautiful BC. Terrence, how are you, sir?
Good. It's significantly less beautiful, of course, as you know. With we're getting some of that wildfire runoff. So obviously, everybody out there in California, we hope it stays safe. But yeah, we're choking up here. It's like I said this to you on the phone yesterday. It's kind of like you go outside and we're in a casino.
That's right. Vegas has the first non-smoking casino. I saw that was announced. MGM, I think, is opening up non-smoking.
Oh, well, there's some good news for Vegas tonight. How about?
Yeah. And Mr. Daniel Negreanu back in Las Vegas. It is a tough night for Las Vegas Knights fans.
You know what? It really isn't. It really isn't. I've heard from so many people who are like diehard fans coming into the season, myself included, who were really indifferent to it. They didn't feel bad about it because the way that this upper management treated the people that we loved in this city, which was the coach, Gerard Gallant, and, you know, the face of the franchise, and Marc-Andre Fleury, the way they treated them like absolute cucks. For those that don't know what a cuck is a cuckhole. Where you take Gerard Gallant and you say, you know what? You sit in the corner, you little bitch, while we get the guy that you hated from the season before, and we're going to have him take your job while you watch, right? Then they take Fleury and they say, listen, don't worry. Everything's fine. We're going to add some depth. You're going to play him back and forth. He's like, you know what? No. You sit in the corner while this other bull cuck master is going to make you watch as your team loses its ass over here in the playoffs. So a lot of people were like not even rooting for Vegas. Like, I found myself conflicted during the game. I'm like, I don't even think I'm rooting for them anymore. I love the players. I think the players are great. I like them all. I don't think it's their fault. I think we have an absolute shitty coach, and upper management treats people like shit. Not only them, the media people too, the goalie coach Dave Pryor, like they have so much arrogance and condescension for the fan base. Like, you don't do that. Like, you don't be a new franchise who just came on and then take the two people that we fell in love with the most and be like, treat them like dogs. If they would have been honest with Fleury, that's one thing. If they were honest with Gallant, don't tell him he's walking in for a contract extension and then say, oh yeah, by the way, you're fired, so you're going to be my little cuck now.
Yeah, it's interesting what's happened there, right? I mean, George McPhee came in, and I know we're going to get off on hockey stuff, but it was completely obvious. To your point, Gerald Gallant was loved by that city, loved by the fan base. Marc-Andre Fleury, the exact same. It's like you took your captain, if you had two captains and just traded them away like it was nothing. It's weird how they just went after the two most popular people in the franchise.
Well, yeah, and listen, what did they do that for, right? If you look at Fleury, so Fleury's dad passed away. For about a 2-week period after that, he didn't play very well. He was obviously maybe a little off. October, November, he was fantastic, right? The need to bring in Lehner wasn't necessarily there. If you want to add depth, that's great. But with Gallant was actually pegged to be the coach at the All-Star game. What that means is that his team was in first place at the time when they did that a few weeks before. The team lost a couple games in a row. Happens. First time he's ever lost 4 games, and it's like he took a freaking random bunch of misfits, took them to the final, brought him to the playoffs the next year, and all of a sudden he has a 4-game losing streak, and you go, not only that, 24 hours later, you bring the clown, who we like. This is the thing. When you're a franchise, you create these rivalries, right? So we learn to hate the Sharks, That's kind of a thing. So, like, how are we supposed to feel about a guy we just hated 15 minutes ago? Now we love him? Like, oh, he's our guy? Like, It's just awkward and weird, and it was totally unnecessary. There was no good reason to do that. It just makes no sense.
And the other thing is, DeBoer's not likable in the slightest.
No, he's just an arrogant prick. Like, he wouldn't even acknowledge after San Jose won. Okay, they won. That big game, obviously, where Vegas let up freaking 4 goals in a power play, which is obviously on them or whatever, right? You can win the series and at the end at least be honest and be like, instead of saying, well, they shouldn't have let in 4 goals. You could have been honest and said, yeah, that probably shouldn't have been a major. That doesn't make you look like an asshole. It just makes you look honest. But he was a dick the whole way, and he still is. And it's like, I can't do that. I root for people. And I never liked him then. Now that he's wearing a Vegas Golden Knights crest, I'm supposed to like him? I don't. I don't like the coach. So it was hard for me to root for the team when I hate the guy behind the bench.
Terrence taking wallpaper trolling to a whole new level.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Can you see? Does that work out well?
You got that look. Yeah, that's fantastic. But more importantly, on a much more somber note, this has been a tough sort of podcast to get ready for myself, and I'm sure some of the other people, you guys too, who have come to know Mike Sexton over the years. And Mike passed away at the age of 72 just a little over a week ago. The outpouring of support in the poker community was not unexpected, and it was every bit as awesome as you can imagine. Mike, if you guys will permit me just to kind of go off a little bit here, Mike was the perfect spokesman at the perfect time for poker. He came along and he was so good at it, and he was just the nicest guy to everybody. And full stop. Like, he was just the perfect guy to come along for poker, and he got hired by Party Poker to, at the time, Poker Stars. What year was Poker Stars, Terrence, started?
2001.
2001. So Paradise Poker was the big dog on the block at the time, and Party Poker came in, decided they were going to start an online poker site, and try and take over the world, so to speak. And they hired Mike Sexton, among other people. But Mike was their point man. He was their guy, and for the poker industry guy, to be the front of the site and set up and implement his ideas to turn Party Poker into the poker site of choice for poker players. And there was a specific thing that Mike did, and it was the Party Poker Million cruise. You have to understand, like, I was lucky enough to be hired as a prop really early in the day. So I saw that place when they had 4 tables right at the start. And Mike took this idea that he had to make a Party Poker Million cruise where everybody would win a shot to go try and win $1 million in a tournament. And he devised a system of satellites for people to start very low and win their way onto this cruise ship. And it would be the big happening. And everybody in the poker world would be there. And that was part of the allure for the casual player. And they pulled it off. And I was on that first Party Poker Million cruise. I can't remember, Daniel, you were probably there. Terrence, did you go?
Mm-hmm. Not maybe it wasn't the first one.
The very first one?
Yeah.
It was an amazing event. And I'll never forget, Kathy Liebert won it, and it was $1 million for first, and I think it was $80,000 for second, because of course they didn't have
they wanted to put $1 million up top.
Yeah, they put $1 million up top, right? So, but anyways, that's sort of beside the point. It lost $500,000 or $600,000 that first year, and Ruth Parasol and some of the other people that own Party Poker, Vic Rentz, and I think I can't remember the other guy's name. They weren't sure that they wanted to do it again, and Mike said, "No, full stop. You have to do this again. It's going to turn the country, or it's going to turn the industry around, and it's going to make our site the biggest one." And for sure that happened, and they stuck with Mike, and Mike got hired by the World Poker Tour. The World Poker Tour was on that cruise, Steve Lipscomb, and that's the germination of it. And Mike got hired by the World Poker Tour, and of course became their spokesman for decades. And the karate chops. I'll never, when Mike did the broadcasting, he'd never done broadcasting, right? And he stepped in and he was really good at it. And
I want to just interject really quickly.
Yeah, please.
It was more than just Mike was hired by the WPT. He was really at the forefront of actually creating this thing, because the first filming of the cruise that you talked about, the Party Poker Million Truth, was filmed by Steve Lipscomb, who ended up coming up with the idea and they needed money, so they went to Lyle Berman. So Mike Sexton was not just somebody that was hired, really, even by Party. Like, I was there, I remember, at the Poker Million, which was one of the first TV events we had ages ago. And Mike was sitting with a group of Indian men, businessmen, and, talking about this thing, So he was at the very early onset. He told me, he's like, he had to teach him what a check was, what a bet was. Like, they were starting from absolute scratch. So Mike had more of a role than just, like, sort of, being a consultant for Party that was just, not involved, or even with the WPT, he wasn't simply like, oh, we'll hire him as commentator. Like, he had the vision for it. And I'm sure I'll let you continue, but after that, I want to go back, because this was after he'd already been like the visionary in poker with the Tournament of Champions. And
yeah, that's a good point. So let's go back to that. I remember, so I went down to LA and I was playing poker, and I remember Mike telling anybody who would listen that, and this was, I believe it was 1998, that the poker needed the Tournament of Champions, and he was going to put this together, and sponsorship was going to come to poker, and poker players were going to look like NASCAR guys with, patches all over their shirts, and everybody was just like looking at him like, are you crazy? That's not even, there's no chance that's happening. Nobody cares about poker. Poker happens in the back room of some, sketchy club. This isn't ever going to happen, right? And Mike was convinced. And the first Tournament of Champions, everybody sat down at their table. They got a hat, they got some swag, and I'd love to, maybe somebody kept all that stuff, but.
I got some of that stuff, man.
Do you still got it?
So listen, that event, right? That event was like nothing we'd ever seen before in poker. Like, to me, I still remember it, maybe because I was young and new to poker, but I remember it being one of the most prestigious events I'd ever seen because everybody came in with flags. Like, he made this an Olympic event, right? Where the way that the Tournament of Champions was put together, like, you had to either be a World Series of Poker bracelet winner or you had to win a tournament in the past year in order to qualify for this amazing thing. And then you played stud, Hold'em, and Omaha 8 or better. When you got to the money, you switched to No Limit Hold'em. But the buzz around it, the way that Mike envisioned it, and to echo even more of what you were talking about with Mike being the only guy, I remember reading the Poker World magazine, which was before Card Player it wasn't around for very long. I remember seeing a big article and several. Mike Sexton always saying, corporate sponsorship is right around the corner. And I'm like, gee, this is some bullshit. Like, nobody's going to fucking Coca-Cola and Budweiser are not going to come around. But he believed in this stuff. He had a vision that no one else had. He didn't know how it was going to happen. He didn't know exactly where it would go with the whole card cam. This was before any of that kind of stuff. All he knew there was something here, and he single-handedly really made this shit happen. With the Tournament of Champions, he found a rich guy in Chuck Humphreys to fund it, because that's the hard part, right? You have to pitch to someone. With the World Poker Tour, he brought Lyle Berman on board and said, this is a great idea. But he actually, I really hate the term poker ambassador. I think it's so incredibly stupid. Like, you're not an ambassador. Mike Sexton was a poker ambassador, okay? Leave it there. He's the only poker ambassador we ever had, period. Drop the ball on that. Like, he is exactly what you said earlier, treated everyone with respect, whether you were like, he really did. And I saw this with my own. If you played 1-2 no limit or you played super high stakes in Bobby's room, he treated you the same. I don't know almost anyone like that who treats just the random guy and gives him the exact amount of time as he would Doyle Brunson or Phil Ivey or some of the big names in poker. Mike was just like, he's universally liked. How many people in poker do we have that can say that?
No, none, absolutely none. Like, you can't find somebody in the poker world that will say a bad word about Mike Sexton or ever did.
Well, I can.
Okay.
He hustled me at golf pretty damn good. I never got.
Let's hear it. I want to hear I got hustled by Mike Sexton on the golf course.
I got caught in the crossfire between him and Phil Ivey, right? So we're playing at TPC Summerlin, and they're playing really big. I decided to play Mike Sexton 10,000 a hole. And I say, well, Mike, what do you shoot? And he says, I'm a bogey golfer. So for those of you that don't know, bogey means 90. It means you'd shoot 1 over par on each hole. So I'm thinking, okay, 90, I'll match up against that, as though he's a 90 golfer. Hole number 4, 5, and 6, he goes birdie, birdie, birdie. Okay? I'm like, I don't know many bogey golfers who birdie 3 holes. And he said, and of course, he says, first time in my life I ever birdie 3 holes in a row. So he ends up shooting a solid 75, okay? Buries me and says, it's the round of my life. And I said, you know what, Mikey? Seems like everybody I played this week has had the round of their life. Him and Phil were just like, because there was a bloodbath, them two going at it. And Phil was playing great, and he was playing great, and I was just the sucker in the middle. I got the shrapnel, and I lost like 90,000 playing 10,000 a hole to Mike Sexton through 18. And I played good to only lose like 90,000. So one of the things, though, it's like, because it's Mike, it's like, you're not even mad. Yeah. It's like, you got me. Good one.
Here's the 90. Way to go. Yeah.
If you go through the all the social, the point is, to Daniel's point, your guys' both points is saying it's hard to find somebody who has a negative thing to say about him. I mean, you sort of, I didn't know Mike well. I didn't have the interactions with him that you guys did and a lot of people in the poker world did. But when news broke of his illness and then, a few days later his passing, I read every tweet, I read every article that was written about him, and it gives you something to sort of say, like, when it's my time, like when I get to that age, when my time is coming, like, will people speak the way about me that people speak about Mike Sexton? And that's not a realistic goal for most people because he has done so much, but it's something that you can strive towards. You know, it's something that you can just say, like, this is the measure of a man by what people are going to say, you know, in these moments. And so
what would Mike do is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the joke that goes around party poker, right? It was always what would Mike do, or the WPT is what would Mike Sexton do. So it's we lost a good one, and all we can do is sort of honor his memory by continuing to do good things for the game that has given us so much, that gave him so much, and that he gave so much to as well.
You know what the really cool thing about it was, the way he believed in the tournament champions, the way he believed in party poker, the way he believed in the game of poker. He believed in people, not just on a macro level, but to everybody he met. To Daniel's point about treating everybody with the exact same respect. I remember we started Mike Johnson and I started this podcast 2004, 2005. And we were broadcasting at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night in Vancouver, where this is a poker show. Like
on AM radio, not the internet, on AM radio.
No, like there was no podcasts at this time. Like, are we going to get a dozen listeners away? That'd be great. So you know what? We were like, okay, who are we going to ask to be on this show? Well, we had three people that we wanted to ask to be on the show. One of them was Greg Raymer, who had just won the main event of the World Series. Mike Sexton, who was poker ambassador extraordinaire. And Daniel Negreanu, who, because we're Canadian, we thought, hey, we let's try and get these three. Let's see how many of the three we can get for our very first show. We got all three, because all three of them are class acts and didn't care how many people were listening, and jumped on and believed in us and were happy to talk to us and treated us just like anybody else in their life. And I go back to that because in person, you know, he just believed in people. And I think I told the story on Twitter. I go to this Savage Invitational Golf Tournament every year. It's a ton of fun. And, you know, there's this scramble and I got paired up with Mike in a scramble, and there's a Calcutta before the scramble event happens. And what happens in a Calcutta is all the teams are auctioned off. And, you know, there's tons and tons of betting given, you got to imagine who's there, right? People are betting huge amounts of money on their teams in the Calcutta. Well, Mike is on my team and he bets tons and tons of money on us. And I'm one of the worst top players. So I'm basically, they call them A players, and I'm one of the lower A players because my handicap's 7 or 8 at the time. And, you know, there's scratch guys there who in a scramble, that's a big deal. So Mike gets stuck with me, who one of the lower A players, but he doesn't care. He just, you know, he had all kinds of confidence in me, and I didn't start off very well, and I was kind of like Mike, because in a scramble you got to get, you know, your drives in. Everybody's got to have, I think it was 3 or 4 drives, and I wasn't hitting. I'm like, Mike, why don't we get these drives in? And he looked at me and he goes, "You're the best 8 I've ever seen in my life. When you're under the gun, you're going to hit a great shot, and we're going to be fine. We're going to use this drive over here." And I'm like, okay. So it comes down to 18, and we need an eagle to tie for first. And Mike again has bet tons of money, and so I hit a good drive, and I hit a 3-iron to about 20 feet on the green, and I rolled in the putt. And he looked at me and he said, "I told you." And he believed in me. And I don't know, I can't explain it, but all I can say is those swings were pretty easy when Mike Sexton's looking at you and believes that you're going to do it. And that's the kind of, you know, that's a lasting memory. I'll always remember. He looked me right in the eye and said, "I told you." And that happens so many times in the poker world over so many experiences. Every interaction with Mike was like that. And I know when somebody passes away, there tends to be this sort of over romanticizing of them, but I don't think this is possible with Mike. I really don't. He was an open book. Mike didn't have anything to hide. He bet on sports and didn't do great all the time. And he lost a bunch of money in party poker because he took a buyout before it went public, and he would have had $500 million. You got to remember, party poker went public for $8 billion. It was the first day party poker went public on the London Exchange. It was worth more than British Airways. And Mike had sold his shares about 10 months prior for some amount of money that wasn't $500 million that he would have got for his share. He told the book and the story. He was that guy. He didn't care that people would think less of him or not, or that he was, you know, made a stupid mistake or whatever. It didn't bother him. He lived his life.
You know what else did really well? was he appreciated people and he showed them and he acknowledged them in ways that was really deep. Like, give you a few examples. Not too long ago, he was holding like a small little charity event for like a high school, like a rinky-dink, not a huge thing, right? And he'd asked that I'd show up, just, it'd be great for the thing. And I did, and he made it a point to like let me know how grateful he was. I had a St. Jude event, right? And he of course attended that, and he made sure to remind me, because I was doing the emceeing, who to thank. Like, make sure you let everyone know what Matt Stout did to put this on. All these kind of things. And I remember way back when, this was after the TLC first year, he tried to create this kind of Ryder Cup event. Okay, few people remember this. So he wanted to do all these qualifiers to make the Ryder Cup team, which was the North American team versus, European, kind of like the golf thing. And he had these little qualifiers, and the first one was at the bike, and the room was decorated with all the flags and everything like that. And it was like a, big to do, right? And like, you expected 200-300 people to show up. 3 people showed up, right? I was one of those 3 who showed up for it, right? But he didn't see, it was a flop, right? But he's super appreciative of myself and the other 2 people who showed up, and really still believed in it, and he kept on chugging. Like, if he would have been defeated in that moment and said, maybe then World Poker Tour would never happen. The party poker thing, poker would not look the same. Like, he has single-handedly done more for poker and promoting the game than anybody by such a wide margin. It's hard to even put into words.
Yeah, and if you want to go back and listen to a lot of Mike's friends talk about Mike. Mike Matisow did a Mouthpiece podcast right after Mike passed away and just opened up the phones. And I'm not a huge fan of Mike and whatever, but he did an amazing job with this show. And if you're at all interested in hearing stories about Mike or people that cared about him, I thought it was awesome what Matisow did and allowed just anybody who wanted to come on and talk about Mike, as well as the Poker News podcast, who did a special and brought a bunch of his friends on. So check those out. Very, very sad, and our obviously our wishes are with Mike's family and his young son, and I hope they can remember the good times with Mike and go forward with that. But we've got a podcast to do, so why don't we move on to some of the stuff. The World Series of Poker online has come to an end, Daniel. Mercifully, it's been many days and trials and tribulations of being in Mexico, and storms and all kinds of different crazy stuff going on. You battled through, you cashed a ton of times. We've gone over it with the podcast, how many times and how many runs you had. It was ridiculous how many times you ended up getting into the money, but didn't have that deep run and just kind of getting.
I would love to see the stats on hours played, hands played. I mean, obviously your profit is a bit of an ugly one, but I mean, like you put in the grind this summer for sure.
I'll tell you what. So I almost owed Alan Kessler like a big chunk of money, because I didn't know there was a global poker championship thing on Sunday in the WSOP that was a World Series of Poker Bracelet. I had no clue. I mean, it was hardly promoted. I didn't see it. Alan lets me know about this thing. I'm like, well, shit. I mean, I got one more shot. Might as well play it. So there's like 80 players left. I'm chip leader. 60 players left. I'm chip leader. I'm up there, blah, blah, blah. Make a long story short, I make this deep run, the deepest run I had all summer. We're down to the final 9. I'm still in there. I ended up busting, but I was so super close thanks to Alan Kessler. And one thing I want to say about looking back over the summer and looking at how I played that tournament versus the ones before, I played that one better than I did all summer. Like, looking back, there was a lot of significant mistakes I was making. And, part of that I'm seeing through different lens because I'm going to start studying now, right? A little bit of poker. But there's subtle things that I've implemented incorrectly that overall I would suggest caused me to minimize profit in a lot of spots that I could have made more chips on. And there were some certain spots where I lost stacks that I wasn't supposed to lose. So looking back on it, I wish I could do it all over again, because I think I'd have a much better chance today. And that's only after being gone for a week. And actually, instead of just playing, just thinking about the game and sort of strategizing and trying to come up with, because obviously I have a new thought in mind in terms of what I'm practicing for, which is a heads-up poker match that I agreed to foolishly, that still working out the details of and exactly when and to be announced. But so now I'm out, starting to think about that, and I realized how many of the concepts or the things I'm thinking would have benefited me in the tournaments as well.
Can you give examples? Like, what are some mistakes that you made?
Right. So, like when I used to play poker back in the day, my sizing was always like 2/3 pot for my C bets. Right. That's what I used to do. Most people did. And then obviously, GTO has shown that like quarter pot betting is like pretty unexploitable for the most part, right? It's like, it's a good bet, basically. It's a good C betting amount, quarter, right? But it's not necessarily the only one you want to have, right? And I was too often, I think especially in tournaments, I was too often just, going with my standard quarter pot bet in spots where, especially in certain situations, I could have been using 3/4 or 2/3 and, increasing pot size, also eliminating some hands that I just didn't necessarily want in there, turn and river. So like winning more pots too as well. Like it's something that Phil Hellmuth does sometimes too, where he like bets a lot because he just wants to win the fucking pot. So he's like, get out, So he like, in a vacuum, you look at it and you're like, well, that's a mistake. He just went all in with aces pre-flop. That's stupid, He's costing himself value. Well, he's thinking in terms of survival and, he doesn't want to go pro. But overall, I think that I was not implementing, and it's funny because I think people got better too, and I noticed that. Because when I first started using quarter pot sizing, when I trained with my guys a year and a half, 2 years ago, it really worked well, like incredibly well. Like people were making a ton of mistakes against it, but I think most people are doing it now, and they've learned how to, correctly peel. Like what hands are they peeling with? Now they're peeling correctly. Like before, you bet quarter pot and the flop comes like, queen 6/4, people would be overfolding in spots. Like they weren't calling as often as they should. Now people were. So it sort of incentivizes sometimes maybe some bigger sizing. Overall, I think there was definitely some like one call I look back on now, just a huge mistake where it was raised under the gun, guy flatted, I defended the big blind with queen 5 of clubs. And I remember the next day defending this play. And a lot of people, oh, you're horrible, you're whatever. I'm like, no, they were right. I had queen 5 of clubs defend, that's normal. That's like a standard thing. And then it came queen jack 7, check, the under the gun better bet. The other guy folds, I call. Turns a 3, I check, he bets 3/4 pot. I call. River's a 3, I check, he bets half pot. Where's the biggest mistake there, do you think?
Did we talk about this hand? I can't remember if we had this.
I don't think we talked about this hand. This one's new to me, but I mean, I think the sizing on the like for the sizing, the turn is probably it's probably pretty close between calling and folding. I think. Because like how much more behind is there that he can bet on the river? Because if you're playing like very deep, like it's very hard for you to like call, and then because he can really barrel off in the river and put you in a terrible spot.
Oh yeah, I mean it's deep in a tournament. He has like a full pot size bet left, but you're absolutely right. And then but that's a spot where you got top pair, right? Yeah. But then you have to ask yourself, like, if you really break it down, or like this guy raised into the gun, he bet into 2 people. And he's betting again. So big deal you have a queen. You know what I mean? Like big deal you have a queen. Like you're just beating like very few bluffs that he probably doesn't have all that much for that sizing. Now, having said that, the river call is fine.
Yeah.
River call, by that point, he's only betting half pot. And now my hand improved because now I have queens and 3s with a jack kicker. So queen 10 suited, queen 9 suited. Now, I chop with that. So that one, it's odd, but like the river, it's odd to say that the river was kind of okay. But the turn was where I should have, gotten out of the hand and in that spot. So again, just thinking about the game and going over it, like definitely some blown opportunities. But listen, you always get better. I mean, I'm always going to get better at poker, no matter where I'm at. Like I always feel like 6 months from now, I'll be better than I am today.
I'm curious what you think, Daniel, and maybe it's too soon to reflect on it. But this is a really long series, and I know you've played long series of online poker before and coops and different things. This one was long, and the fact that you moved away, it's on your site. Talk maybe a little bit about the difference of online poker in your game and live poker, because for me, watching you play live poker, you're very good at working your opponent and talking to him and sort of, doing that versus online where it's not quite the same thing. And I wonder if, your edge is as big online as it is live.
Yeah, definitely not. Right. So one of the benefits of playing live is, exactly who you're playing, whereas the only way to do that online is, and especially if you're playing against a lot of different people in big fields, is taking a whole shit ton of notes. And when you're playing every single day and you're playing 8 to 10 hours, it's easy to be sloppy and lazy with that. Like I wasn't taking as many notes as I should have. I wasn't getting reads on my opponents. Like it was much easier to play the 6-max events because when you only have 5 guys at the table, you'll have a lot more interactions with them that you can sort of develop sort of a portfolio on that player. But when you're in an 8-handed game and, you're playing for a while, like you don't really know, like the hardest part for me was to distinguish the difference between like the different regs because a lot of them have relatively similar approaches, right? So figuring out, okay, well, this guy's bluffing a little more than this guy. Like that was not really a thing that I was doing as well as I could have online. So I would say that that's where, I didn't grow up with online poker in that regard, like, being able to focus in that regard. And I should have been, but also I think because I was playing every single day, it became difficult to like just pay that kind of attention. Whereas maybe if it was like once a week or once every couple days, I could like zone in real hard. But like, you sort of like, you're done with this one, you got another one tomorrow, just keep playing your game, you'll be fine. Kind of like idiot Pete DeBoer says.
Did you find streaming a distraction at all?
Yeah,
or did it make you helpful? Was that helpful? Was it harmful? Was it neutral?
The thing about streaming for me is I actually found it fine in terms of being able to focus on the game and actually pay attention. Like that, I wasn't hurt there. Where it was a problem for me is just my physical stamina. Because when I play, like I'm laying down and I'm quiet, okay? And I actually had, and people don't get this and I've had this argument a bunch, like I'm an introvert when it comes to where my energy comes from, okay? I charge my batteries when I'm alone and I much prefer being alone and quiet. When I'm with people and I'm talking, whatever, I'm expending tons of energy, like an insane amount. My heart rate's elevated. So when I'm done streaming or, near the end, I'm exhausted, right? So if I play like, I'm in hour 6 streaming and I feel like I've been streaming for 30 hours. Whereas if I was laying on the couch, or doing whatever, I'd feel a lot less spent mentally and physically. Like that Queen 5 hand, that happened late in the night and I was kind of tired. I was just like, because the way I stream too is different than what I've watched everyone else do. I watch other people stream sometimes and they don't talk that much, right? They do their thing, they're on their phone. Occasionally they'll look up at a comment, say something, but like I was nonstop talking for like 8 hours. Like I would talk about the hand. I would read something. I would yell at a troll. I would, whatever. I was constantly engaged. And I noticed when I slowed that down and I was like, maybe I shouldn't talk as much and I'll put some music on or something like that. That was better. That was helpful. But my nature is to just, continually engage. I just think that what I had set up for Vegas, which was just like 1 hour a day, that was really good. Because, I would just put my hour in. I still felt tired after the hour, but not as bad as what I was doing in Cabo sometimes, playing 6, 7 hours, 8 hours, streaming the entire time.
Okay, Daniel, let's talk about your bracelet bets because you put out the challenge at the beginning of the series and said, hey, I want to put some bracelet bets. Anybody want to bet against me up to the guess, I think it was 100K, can come at me and let's go. One of the guys that did end up taking it, it's not the last event because you played in the last event and almost won it, but one of the last scheduled events was Connor Drynan, and he ended up winning a bracelet, costing you the one bet that you made with him, although the terms of the bets are World Series Poker bracelet for the rest of the year. So we have this sort of thing that's hanging over poker. Will the World Series of Poker happen in live? Obviously, it's happened online, but will a live version of it happen either in Rosvadov, World Series of Poker Europe, or in Las Vegas? Las Vegas looks unlikely, given the current state of COVID in the U.S. But Rosvadov, I'm not sure that they care too much about that stuff. Although I'm just, I'm guessing at that. I don't know.
It's not that they don't care. They have virtually no infection.
Yeah. So, given that there might be a World Series of Poker Europe, you've got one bet that you've got to win a bracelet to break even with, and if you do win one, you'll win a bunch of bets. Any thoughts on the rest of the year as far as the World Series goes?
So my long shot hope, right, is I'm not going to travel to Europe to play the World. If there happens to be a live World Series Poker Europe, I don't plan on traveling to go do that. Even though I would have a chance to win all these bets and whatever, get even on the Connor Drynan bet. And I think you can basically rule out a World Series of Poker here in Las Vegas. I don't think that's even on the chalkboard anymore. So the only other option, right, and this is not me this isn't on the board, but it's a hope. Just like what happens if like there was a World Series of Poker Europe online, right? The World Series of Poker bracelets, where we just happen to have 300 bracelet events that are all stud 8 or better, right? And they're all limited. You have to qualify, and the only way to qualify is if you were born in Canada, have exactly 6 World Series of Poker bracelets, and over 35 million in earnings. Okay?
I happen to be a spokesman for GG Poker.
We can massage some of the rules, okay? In stone on the numbers and things like that. But I'm thinking, I could, create something out of nothing, and make them do it.
Oh my God!
I'll split it with them. Okay, guys, I'm gonna win like $1 million off this. I'll give you 20%.
Columns. The columns tomorrow. I can just see them. Yeah, no, for sure. And so I agree with you. I don't think Las Vegas is going to have an event this year. So it's the calendar year, though, right? So December 31st, you lose the bet. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. The bet was I thought it was pretty clear what I said, which is 2020.
Yeah.
Right? It said win a bracelet in 2020 in any form that happens. If it's an official World Series of Poker bracelet and you win, you win. Now, I had some other bets that were GG specific, right? And those obviously won't be a part of it unless. No, I think I don't think even if there was like say for example a GG World Series full event, I don't think that those would count for the bracelets that I had that were GG only. But you know what? Bottom line is since nobody won those. Other than, Connor's mine would count with him anyway. But if people wanted to do the bet, it would basically just be like, it's up to us, I don't care either way.
So let's talk about the World Series of Poker success on GG Poker and WorldSeriesOfPoker.com as well. A bit of a rough start, obviously, at GG. There was some server issues and maybe didn't anticipate the amount of people that were going to show up for this thing. But it sure got smooth in a hurry. The software people seem to love. The different things with the peep cam. What's it called? The peep cam?
Oh, the snap cam.
The snap cam.
You can say, I'm surprised there was not one dick pic sent.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Impossible.
Was there any? There had to be somebody go sideways with this thing.
I had Damani on my table a ton, and he would send me snaps all the time of him just like, taking a big freaking pull off a bong, just going like this.
That's awesome. It got into high gear. And, we were on the podcast last time and we were talking about the main event. And the main event had a $25 million guarantee, the biggest tournament in online poker history. Through, I think it was 13 or 14 of 22 flights, it wasn't looking great for the guarantee as far as the number of players. And Daniel, we even tried to flip you some EV and you wanted to take the side of not making it. And lo and behold, they crushed the guarantee.
Well, it's a good thing we didn't bet on it, though.
No, we bet 100 on it. I got $100 out of you. I gave you 3 to 1.
There's tape, bro. Like, listen, it wasn't a real bet.
Ross, this is the part where you insert last week's tape into this week's show.
It wasn't really bet on it. Like, you guys have to know, I was just kidding.
You were kidding, yeah.
I was obviously joking.
You were kidding the way that Sexton was kidding that he was a bogey golfer.
Yeah.
5,802 total entries in a 5K online event.
That was a bet. That was a prop bet. I was happy to lose.
Yeah.
I was very happy for GG because, listen, that was something that I, like when they said 25 million guarantee, and again, limited number of limited number of bullets per player. Like if you don't limit the bullets, you're going to have people fire 10, 20 bullets, whatever, right? But when you have only 3, that's like, dude, this is nuts for 25 million. That's a lot of money. And the last thing I wanted to have happen is them like miss it by a lot. If they missed it by a little, such is life. But like the fact that they smashed it out of the park and it capped off a series where the numbers were beyond anybody's expectation. Like you said, this is the tail end of a very long summer. There's been series after series on all the competing sites. Yet when push came to shove, GG's traffic was as good as you could ever. I mean, it was far better than you could ever imagine. Better than every other, every one of our competitors. And from to a man, the players who play on the software all enjoy it. Like it's just a lot more fun experience. Obviously, you got my face in there. You can do running hots with, and I play with a lot of these guys. I think I'm playing against Daniel DeVoris. His avatar is me breaking a freaking laptop, and the whole idea behind that stuff is to make it fun, genuine. Like it really is an important aspect of like creating an online game that's fun for people to play. Like you can set it up all professional and like a spreadsheet and have like spots for HUDs and all this kind of shit and, you know, whatever, make it easy for pros to 40 table. We don't want it to be easy for pros to 40 table. You don't want that. You want it to bells and whistles. People all say, oh, can we get rid of the river squeeze? No, we can't. The river squeeze is awesome, okay? It causes an emotional pain. Like my wife would get anxiety over it when she would watch me and she would see me peel and I'd be like, babe, it's it's paint. She'd be like, oh my God. And then I'm like, fuck, and she would lose it, you know? So you ride the agony and the defeat of the emotional roller coaster, which is, you know, a good thing. You want to feel like that when you're playing the game.
5,802 entries, prize pool of $27.5 million for an online tournament. You know, where does GG go from here? I guess 30 million is the next logical one. I'm sure they're going to be aggressive and try.
That's a good idea necessarily.
Yeah, when we get live poker back, I don't know if they want to guarantee 30 million.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Will we ever see an online tournament this big again?
I think what the event really did, and I think it's worked, and I think, you know, you're just going to continue to build off this momentum, is it just put GG on the map as you know, a prime place to play online poker for people, where it really got out there, you know, having the connection to the World Series of Poker brand, which has been established since 1970, was really kind of legitimizing, you know, giving credence to the fact that like GG is you know, the new kid on the block and they should be taken seriously.
Real quick,
yeah, it really feels like the series. Sorry, Terrence. It really feels like the series that built GG, right? I mean, absolutely agree with you. I think this is going to catapult GG into the well, it already is there, but it'll be one of the sites for a long time to come. Sorry, Terrence. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention, you know, a little bit of news that occurred was that PokerStars pulled out of China. That's a very big market for GG. It very much reminds me of when, after the UIGA, that party pulled out of the United States and PokerStars took over as number one and never looked back. You know, still was on top of the leaderboard 13 years straight and continues to this day. But Stars pulling out of China is got to be an interesting news in the GG boardroom. You know,
they're kind of pulling out of China. Okay. I mean, they're pulling out of China. Yeah. They're pulling out of China. They're just kind of pulling out of China. Wink, wink.
You know, unofficially, officially, one of those deals. So just quickly back to the main events, $3.9 million for first prize of an online poker event is something. I still kind of shaking my head. Bulgarian poker player Stoyan Madanziev takes it down. He beat the pocket aces of China's Wenling Gao. Female who ended up finishing second. Really good story, right? I mean, a woman winning second prize in a...
She is now the number one money winner for female tournament players.
In one tournament.
Wenling Gao is number one on the all-time women's money list for World Series.
Wow. So that's awesome. Yeah. Really cool story. And yeah, GG just knocked it out of the park, obviously. WSOP.com. I think, you know, the one downside, and I'm sure GG is going to work on this, Daniel, with you, is getting some mixed games. And maybe that isn't something that they want. I don't know. I mean, that's the question, right? Do the casual players want to be able to play stud 8 or better? I'm not sure the answer to that. I know the poker players want GG to have that.
I think for the World Series of Poker, those events are always very, very important, right? Now, you have to balance that against the sort of functionality of the homepage, right? You want to keep it as simplistic as possible and not overcrowd the lobby. Like, I think the mistake a lot of sites have is like, for a newcomer, they come in and they're like there's just too much information and there's too much. So on one side of the coin, you have simplicity, right? I do think that there is room to have one tab for, you know, mixed games, and you can just sort of put everything under that umbrella, you know, and things like that. But again, that comes down to, you know, software development. And in order to do that, it's a whole new wing of software development, because we've never created software for stud, right? So you have to look at, you know, the table build. It's quite complicated, but I do hope and I do think that, you know, let's say, for example, if we were to do something like this again next year, that by that time we could have the 50K, you know, like a 50K mixed 8-game tournament or something like that. So I definitely would obviously push for that, because I'm a mixed game aficionado. And I think part of what make the World Series of Poker special is the fact there's mixed games. Unfortunately, this year, because we didn't have enough time to do something like that, there was no mixed games. But I would hope that if this was something that happened next year, and I hope it doesn't have to happen next year, right? Because we can just play normal at the Rio. But who knows?
Yeah. GG is also doing something pretty neat here. Now that it's over, they're having the Good Game series of poker. It started at GG's, already underway. It replicates the WSOP series at GG, but the buy-ins are all a fraction of what the World Series buy-ins were. So I think most events are from $250 to $50 buy-in, and it gives sort of the lower stakes guys a chance to play in the same structure in the same events.
And it also gives the guys who went broke throughout the series a chance to build.
Yeah, why not? Work in your game and have fun with the GG software. So check that out. Moving on, Daniel, you have a heads-up battle that is currently not scheduled, I don't believe yet, but planned against Doug Polk. You guys are going to play some heads-up. Have you decided on a time, a number of hands, blind levels, anything like that? What's sort of going on there? Okay,
so I have some ideas and some things I could announce here that I have not announced publicly in terms of, and I'll probably reach out in the next couple of days. So, first and foremost, we've thought a couple of things we have nailed down, sort of, is somewhere between 10 and 25,000 hands. So it'll be a minimum of 10,000, possibly more, but that is something that we'll work on. I do have an idea for how I'd like to see that play out that I'm still pondering, okay? Secondarily, 2 tables of no limit hold'em, not limit hold'em, so 2 tables of no limit hold'em at the stakes of, as of right now, 200, 400 on each table, okay? So the first thing that I'm gonna propose, and I imagine this will be accepted, is from a structure perspective. We were thinking of doing 100 big blind buy-in, okay, with an automatic top-up. So the stacks will always be at least 100 big blinds deep or more, right? Which I think he should like because he's a cash game guy and whatnot. In addition to that, what I'm thinking about proposing is a 15% rake with no cap on each hand. No rake back for him, but I might work out a deal on the side. Okay, that part was a joke for those that post that.
Why did you say that? I wish you wouldn't have said that, just so people would have taken you seriously. It would have been great.
They would, right? People would take that seriously. So no, but so right now, again, that was what I was sort of fiddling with. Is this what's my best interest here? What gives me the best chance? And I was fiddling with the idea of shorter stacks, or at least the ability to play, like say, for example, because what I thought would be more fun, and I still think this, but he wouldn't go for it, is the idea of playing super deep, but playing, a series of freeze outs. So you play 100K, leave the blinds at really small, you play 100K, 100,000 per, and you play best 3 out of 5 or something like that. I think that would be better for fan engagement. It's a lot, because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Whereas a cash game just is kind of monotonous and it goes on and on and on.
I have a crazy idea. Do you want to hear my crazy idea? I don't know if you can get this in the software, but having a variable ante. So so if you can get GG to program this, you roll a dice and there's a different ante every time, sort of like Splashbot, like they do it, right?
That'll be bad for me.
That'll be bad for you?
Yeah, really bad for me, because
Why?
I don't adjust all that shit. I don't even know how to play poker. I don't even know how to play heads up yet. And now you're going to add this variable at me?
No, but I mean, he's a guy who's studied, the small blind is half of the big blind, 100 big blinds. He's really studied that way more than you. You've got a little more, you play more intuitively. You realize when the ante's big that you're going to play looser, and, the pots are going to.
I don't like it.
Really? Wow.
No, really it was that's already screws up my brain. It's already hard enough to learn how to play this fucking heads up shit. It's all about studying. It's honestly really boring. It's I look at the way it was when I learned in the late 90s or whatever, and looking at, the way in which, the game is learned now, it makes you feel like, you're a student in college or university, and you're just studying stuff and how to do it. It's just not as fun as the old sort of figure it out as you go kind of poker. But anyway, so yeah, I think ultimately, well, like I said, I thought, and everyone I know thinks it would be better for me, but that's not why I thought it would be best. I thought it would be best to have sort of a best of 7 series or a best of 5 or something like that, because it's just more exciting and more interesting, especially if you have, and I'm not talking about, some tournament format. It's not a sit and go. If you play if you start 100, 200 big blinds deep and you play for like 1,000 hands and then you kick it up after 1,000 hands or something like that and you just kick the stakes up, you're not going to get to level 3. You won't even get to round 3 before there's an open thing. But anyway, he's opposed to that. So it's going to be one game. We're not picking another game. It's going to be too difficult for me to learn how to play 2 fucking games, of heads up. Because again, that's not my format either. Like if you wanted to see the equivalent, like his format is heads up, no limit, right? My format, if you want to, the direct equivalent is high stakes mixed game tournaments with other people at the table, right? He's learned how to play heads up at all the games. So it's like I'm not going to be able to exploit him in those games because they're pretty, especially because most of them are going to be smaller than no limit hold'em would be, right? So there's no like parallel game where like, oh, you play hold'em and then if you choose this game, then you're 50-50. It just doesn't exist. So that would actually make my work harder because now I have to learn how to play heads up in 2 different formats versus 1. So I'm already a big underdog in this match, right? I've got a lot of learning to do. I'm way behind. I've got to get started, which also plays into don't have a date set. Like I said, I just got home and we're September 14th. I'd like more than 2 weeks to practice because, I think I might need more than 2 weeks to learn all this shit. And then plus we have to work on, sort of like how will this look for the fans and whether or not, hole cards will be seen or whether or not there'll be a delay, whether or not there'll be a broadcast. How long will the sessions be? What's the agreement on number of hands? All that kind of stuff is stuff that like I'm not too concerned with. Like I feel like we can iron that out. And as far as the dates go, listen, there's no pressing like rush. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like October 1st. It's hopefully we can do it in October. If I feel like I'm ready to go, then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give this a decent go, like Rocky, just go the distance. You know what I mean? I just want to go the distance. That's it. If I can get to where I feel confident enough, then we can start talking about, pinning down the exact date. But I'm going to start, studying the game a little bit so that I can expedite the process so that we can hopefully, get something figured out, in the next month.
Okay, sounds good. We'll be on top of that, obviously, when it does go down and keep track. One other quick thing, well, not quick, but one other thing I wanted to bring up before we get on to some mail is the news this week that Jonathon Little, a poker player, was banned from ACR by the CEO of America's Card Room, Phil Nagy. And it kind of played out on Twitter. There was a back and forth between Phil and John and people taking issue with the fact that they banned him. And what Jonathon was banned for was talking bad about ACR. Basically, John Little streams, and he was making fun and had little cartoon emoticons or something that was making fun of America's Card Room as he was playing on it, and saying, I think there was maybe a misunderstanding about talking about is the money safe on ACR, and so I think one of the sponsor pros said your money's safer in ACR than a bank, which is a ridiculous statement to make, and Jonathon took issue with that. But of course, it's well within ACR's, terms of service or however you want to say it, to ban somebody that they don't feel is good for their business. I kind of look at this in a couple of ways, and I want to get into it a little bit. But Terrence, when you saw this story, what did you think of ACR banning him?
I thought it was certainly a bad look for them. As you mentioned, they're a company. They can withhold the ability to service whoever they want. Just like if you walk into the store and I don't like your face, I can kick you out of your store, whether or not it's good for me or not. But whether it's a good idea is another question. I went back and I looked at the Jonathon Little video about, trusting unregulated sites. And there's a few things that are in there that, I don't agree with, but the bottom line was he thought that it was, that the right thing to do was to warn people not to keep very much money on the site. In fact, he was very conservative. He said, don't keep more than 2 days worth of money on the site, which makes it really hard to play poker if you're keeping only 2 days worth of buy-ins on the site. And he was saying that every unregulated site at some point has gone out of business, which is a pretty strong statement. Because obviously the one you can just say that the ones that haven't gone out of business, well, they're going to go out of business, but that's not true. The point is that, I think it's a bad look for ACR and Phil Nagy, and I think he comes off as childish and petulant here. He goes in and says all this stuff. Well, if you go and cause a ruckus in an online in a brick and mortar poker room, like we'll have security will escort you out if you just talk bad about them all the time and you're ranting and raving inside the casino. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not the situation that's happening. This guy is going on YouTube and talking in a way about how you want to be careful with your money. He's trying. Jonathon Little has a right and a responsibility to provide content that he thinks is useful to his viewers. Phil has the right and the responsibility to, maximize shareholder value and maximize the profits of the company. And so if he thinks that kicking out Jonathon Little is the right thing to do, then that is. But it is bad. It's short-sighted. It's so easy. And the funny thing is this video came out in May, which is weird that they're not even acting on it until now. But I mean, the correct way to engage with people on this, and I say this as somebody who's been on both, I was a professional on both sides of the online poker table for almost 15 years, is you take that guy and say, this is an opportunity to re-educate this guy. Like if I'm Phil Nagy, I'm like, I want to have a conversation with you, Jonathon Little. You're an important influencer. You're somebody who's out there, well-known in the poker world, generating content. I want to talk about, I want to show you that your money is safe on ACR. I want to show you that we're a company with ethics and values. And you try to convert that person, and maybe you win and maybe you don't. But you can do this publicly, you can do this privately. But to just say, like, you know what, like, we don't like the videos you put out, and I don't like that you make fun of me on your stream, and so, like, hit the road. I mean, again, they're within their rights to do it, but I think it's a silly business decision. I mean, at the same time, Jonathon Little put out a video that essentially said, don't shit where you eat, which is, in general, a good policy. And I think a lot of the stuff that he did on his streams was childish. Like, apparently he wrote on 2+2, and I might be misinterpreting this, but I think he wrote on 2+2 that, when he would take a bad beat, he had a cartoon of Nagy and, or something like that, and saying, like, I got Nagy'd or something like that. And it's like, that doesn't help anybody. That's just perpetuating this idea that online poker is rigged and, all the stuff that goes into it. That doesn't help grow the game. That doesn't help your brand. It's very understandable why ACR would be or whoever would be very pissed off about that sort of allegation that you took a bad beat because the CEO doesn't like you. That's a silly thing to do. So I think there's blame on both sides here. I think there's more blame on Phil Nagy and the WPN side, the ACR side, than there's on Little's side. But I think if Jonathon Little had to do it over again, maybe he's a little more conservative in the way that he treats the company, where he's trying to make a living.
Yeah, for me, the underlying sort of lesson here that's available to all of us and that we all need to understand, and this is regardless of whether you think it was the right move or not, whether it was justified, the ban or not, is the fact that playing online poker is not a right. It is not a right. You are playing on a private company's service, right? They have every right to say, you know what, I hate this guy. Get out of here. We can all as a community go, you shouldn't have got rid of him. That was injustice and all that kind of stuff. And we might be right in that, but the bottom line is it's important for all the players to realize, like, it is a privilege to be able to play. And like Jonathon Little admitted, if you continually shit where you eat and you talk shit, they have every right to be, you know what? I'm sick of your shit. I don't like your shit. This is my company. This is my site. You're not welcome here anymore. For whatever reason they choose to. That doesn't, again, I'm not talking about right or wrong. I'm not talking about whether, because I thought his comments were not even so harsh. He was just saying,
he actually said, like, ACR is the best. Like, if you're like, he's like, if you're an American and you don't live in whatever the legal states, like, I don't recommend that you play online poker. But if you do, ACR is probably one of the best places to play.
Yeah,
he actually said that. Yeah.
Like, I didn't think his comments were all that bad, but to understand this, especially if you're a professional poker player, right? You are a guest in that person's home, if you will, okay? That is offering you an opportunity to make a living in this player's home, okay? If you treat that home like shit, he may kick you out of his house, Like, you don't get to say, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, I get to stay. He can say, no, I'm sorry. My home game here that I have all these suckers with, you can't play with anymore. It reminds me of the old days that, Doyle and Amarillo Slim and the guys used to travel. Like, they couldn't get in poker games if they were seen as assholes or if they weren't cordial or if they talked shit about the food or the venue and all this kind of stuff. Like, they wouldn't be invited to the games. And we're actually getting closer. It's coming full circle because we're headed back that way, not just with this example, but with private games. the privatization of live games. Obviously, there's not as many live games going on, but private games is a thing that's somewhat flourished. It's like, if people don't want a guy in a game for whatever reason, they can say no. So just understand, like, get from a mindset perspective, if you're a pro, don't think of it as like, I have these rights, I deserve this. You don't get anything. If you get to make a living, awesome. Good for you. Find your way in. Do your best to get in these games, but don't think you're owed a damn thing, because you're really not. And at any moment, whatever you got could shift and change. Like, you could be a great stud player, and all of a sudden, all the sites say, no more stud. Well, what are you going to do? You got to figure that out yourself. So just know that, like, you're not owed any. I mean, I remember seeing a guy write an article about the online poker players' rights, and I'm like, what are you talking about? There's like, they're customers, right? Some of these customers make a living off the service, but ultimately, they're customers, and they're customers that get a say in terms of how they spend their money, but they don't have inherent rights about game conditions and, pricing and all that kind of stuff, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think I'm more on the side of ACR than I am with Jonathon in this case. But the one thing that does scare me is that it stops people from, bringing up serious issues. The only reason that doesn't scare me too much is because ACR has had serious issues with servers, with all kinds of stuff over the years, and people have spoken out against it, and I'm not sure anybody else has been banned.
Well, that's why it's a weird hill to die on, right? I mean, clearly, like, he just doesn't like Jonathon Little. So there's a bit of personal vendetta in there, because, like I said, like, if, I put out the tweet and, it was one of my most, retweeted or liked things or whatever. And I said, like, if everybody who bitched about the Rio during the World Series got banned, there'd be 15 people in the Colossus. And it's like, that's the thing, because, I mean, bitching about the Rio during the World Series is almost like it's like a rite of passage. It's just the thing that you do during the World Series. You complain about cell phone charger guys or whatever, but, like, like, it is Jonathon Little, like, he shouldn't feel entitled to this. And I'm not sure that he does, to be honest. I mean, I don't think he's out there going, I was banned for no reason. Like, he feels he feels hard done by, which I think is a reasonable position for him to take, but he should also, take some accountability for this. But I mean, just as a poker site, I think we do have to talk about, is this an intelligent decision? And I think it's not. I think it's just such a dumb decision, because you have the opportunity to engage somebody who is an influencer, who is relevant in the poker community, and just turn a negative into a positive. Daniel talks about, if you come in as a guest into somebody's house and you take a shit in the living room, they're going to kick you out. Well, sure. But the fact is that if somebody's a guest in my house, like, I'm not making a living hosting people in my house, right? So the comments that you made that you're making a living off of this poker site, it applies the other way as well. The poker site is also trying to make a living too. Now, maybe Jonathon Little is a net withdrawer, and you can say, well, net withdrawers, well, he's not worth very much because he takes more money out of the site than he was. But that's probably not true in his case, because he made a video saying, well, if you've got to play online poker, probably should do it on ACR. Because it's one of the safer places to play. And the fact is, they didn't even try to turn a negative into a positive. They didn't try to engage him in any kind of way. And, honestly, like, that's why ACR, despite having a complete monopoly in a sense, I mean, there's not a monopoly. I mean, part of an oligopoly on the U.S. market, just isn't doing that great, isn't doing the numbers that you would expect a U.S. facing site to do. And that you have all these, like, weird peer-to-peer apps stealing a bunch of market share from what probably should be, if ACR was run a little bit better, doing pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know that these little things causes, like, how many people because of this are like, oh, I'm so upset with what, happened to Jonathon Little, but oh, wait a minute, there's like a Venom thing this Sunday with a guarantee? I'll be right there. So there's a lot of chat and talk about these things, like, affecting, the bottom line, but, like, bottom line is, if he estimates in his calculation that getting rid of this guy is worth more plus, like life EV for his own health, his own mindset, he's sick of it. And if he also thinks it's not going to hurt the business in his regard, then, like, we obviously agree on that.
But his job is not to not hurt the business. His job is to actually grow the business. So you take somebody like Jonathon Little, who is it? Like, imagine if it wasn't Jonathon Little. Imagine if it was you embroiled in this. And you might not shit where you eat. But, like, if you put something out on YouTube that said, like, yeah, these guys are maybe a bit sketch, like, I would like to think that if I'm the CEO of a poker site and Daniel Negreanu thinks my site is sketch, I look at Daniel's, millions of Twitter followers, millions of YouTube subscribers and go, oh shit, like there's an opportunity to fix this. Well, I could throw you off the site, and maybe not a single person would quit in your defense, but that's an opportunity missed.
Sometimes certain people just rub you the wrong way, where you just say, fuck this guy. Like, it just happens. Like, it's happened to people with trolls on.
But is it the way to run a business?
Well, yeah, no, like you said, absolutely. I get your point. But, like, I kind of have, I wouldn't say respect is the word, but I always have an admiration for people who are not afraid to say what they believe. Like, one of his tweets actually made my anally feeding the fucking thing look like tame. Like, it was something to the effect of, like, it was really, I don't know, it was unbelievably graphic, right? So I think we also, too often in poker, have this idea that it's this prim and proper place where everyone needs to be on their best behavior. But poker's kind of a seedy thing. It's gambling. And, like, he fits the mold of, like, the gambler guy. It's like the whole fascination with Barstool and this Dave Portnoy guy, who, for all intents and purposes, is a complete asshole, but has a huge following. And a lot of it is just the fact that people appreciate that as much as he says awful things or whatever, that he at least says what he truly believes. And this guy, CEO, certainly didn't sound like a CEO. And look at that. That actually, that transcends and goes through politics, right? How often have you heard, and I'm not going down the political road, how often have you heard people say, well, I like Trump because he tells it like it is, because he's willing to call out the bullshit and he's willing to curse and, speak in such a way like that. So a lot of people just assume that, like, oh, that's real and that's authentic. So I think in this case, like the way that Najee's handled it, he's going to have his detractors, where the people that believe that a CEO should be prim and proper. Then he's going to have other people go, you know what? He's got balls for just saying, fuck this guy.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if Esai would have banned everybody who said, PokerStars is rigged, right? I mean,
Esai went into the customer service queue when that happened and just be like, he would use a fake name and just type out the response to that guy, telling him why he was wrong. Like, he would spend the time to try to convince one guy. Not even in public, just one email to one guy, and he would do it under a fake name, pretending that he was just a customer service rep.
So it's just a different way to run a company, and I think it's probably important to look and say, well, is he an employee? And I'm talking about Phil Nagy, or does he own the company? Because those are two different things. I think if he's a CEO of a publicly traded company, then he's got to answer for the fact that
it's not publicly traded, though, right?
That's my point.
But I mean, they're still investors. I mean, if somebody invests in your company and hires you to run the company, I mean, his Twitter handle is WPN_CEO. So,
like, his behavior is costing them money, they can actually ask her to have him fired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if they think that this is fine, and listen, I don't think it hurts the bottom line. I actually think the opposite.
I'm not so sure, because I think Jonathon streamed a lot playing on ACR, and he's got a pretty big following. Exactly. And now he's not going to be able to show the thousands of people that watch his streams the ACR software or whatever. Now, who knows? Maybe the people that are watching Jonathon stream are the people that you don't want playing on your site, and you just want the casual player. So maybe it's a net positive at the end of the day. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody does, but yeah.
Also the other thing, if Phil Nagy's so cool, like, he has 5,000 Twitter followers. That's like less than me, like that. Yeah. It's certainly less than Jonathon Little. So yeah, I mean, it's the edgy thing. Like, I get you. Like you guys know I'm a big MMA fan. Like, Dana White is the example, other than Donald Trump, of what Negreanu talked about. Dana White will just, he'll drop F-bombs and he'll say that fight was shit and all this stuff. And he'll be very off the cuff. And it is a very popular way. I mean, it reminds me of the Black Mirror Waldo episode. For those who have watched that. But yeah, I mean, Daniel's point is true. Like, people are sort of craving this authenticity, if that's what you want to call it, or this bad boy stuff. It feels like it's just a fail. Like, it's just, you're letting your personal feelings get in the way of running your business.
Well, one thing's for sure, the poker community as a whole, they don't want to hear corporate spin. Every time Eric Holreiser would write one of these things for Stars or whatever, right? And I'd read this thing and I'm like, oh, fuck. What do you mean price changes? Don't fucking say price changes. What do you got? Pricing changes? Just fucking say what it is. We're increasing the rate. We're going through we're looking at some price changing. I think this is stupid, trying to spin like that. So in one sense, People are sick and tired of that. Like, they don't want to hear the spin of the, and especially poker players, because they're way too smart for that shit. Yeah. Like, they see right through it. And they're like, who are you talking to here? This is some bullshit. So in some sense, I think a lot of people who are used to being preached to and spun to in these ways appreciate a guy who just says the truth. And even if he does have a bad day or is out of line, like, you respect the authenticity. Like, I don't think Phil should have banned him, okay? I don't think he should have banned him. I don't personally think he should have said what he said on Twitter and handled it the way that he has. Probably, I don't personally. But I tell you what, I do admire the fact that he's willing to just do shit his way. And I don't begrudge him. I don't wait for an apology. I appreciate that's how he really feels. And he told us the truth. He told us exactly how he feels about it. He explained his reasoning. I can disagree with his reasoning, and I do. Like I said, I wouldn't have banned him for that. But I can respect the fact that the guy's got a point of view and has every right to exercise it on his own freaking house.
All right, let's quickly get one tweet out of the way before we take off. Terrence, go.
Okay, this guy at Phil_Hellmuth.
Heard of him.
Writes, this is a couple weeks old, but this has got to be like one of the best tweets of the year. A poker writer called me a, quote, confirmed narcissist, end quote. I read it tonight and it hurt. Brackets, in fact, was in bed and turned lights back on to write this. I'm 99% sure a writer doesn't know the definition of narcissism. Not sure my biggest hater would call me that if he knew the definition.
Okay, so Phil's trolling here, right? Like, that's an absolute troll. I mean, he has been called a narcissist, I'm sure, a million times in his life. His wife is a psychologist, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So she understands what that is. I'm sure they've had discussions about what that is.
It's a pretty epic troll. I mean, I think that's the thing. If you kind of read it at the level 1, you're just like, LOL. But yeah, you might be right with the troll idea.
I don't troll. I think he
believes. I highly don't.
I think he really believes it, and I think he was actually hurt by it, because I think what he does, and a lot of people do, like, definitions are, not a lot of people know the specific, like we talked about introvert, extrovert. A lot of people assume what that means, and they're not exactly right. So in his view, he's more than willing to say, I have a big ego, right? So he believes he's a guy that has a big ego sometimes. And he has narcissism as something different than that, right? Which it is. But he doesn't see, because typically someone who actually has narcissistic traits, it's impossible for them to acknowledge that they have narcissistic traits. They wouldn't know. Like, they just wouldn't be able to recognize them specifically. But like, if you actually look through, if you look through like the narcissism traits test, there's like 10 questions or something. My wife and I, we did this together to see how we did. And,
wait. How did you score? What was your percentage?
I think it was 3 or 4 out of 10.
Okay.
So I was like, she's like, oh, you're all these. I'm like, no, I'm not. Hold on. Let's go. I was like, 3 out of 4. So if you look at a lot of them, like, Phil hits the bill. Now, here's the thing. I don't think being a narcissist makes you a bad person. It doesn't. Being narcissistic doesn't mean you're evil, doesn't mean you're bad. He's a kind man. He's a good person. He's very self-absorbed. There's no question about it. He does revert the conversation back to himself a great deal. He has a lot of the traits of a narcissistic person, but I actually think that doesn't preclude you from being a good person. I don't think that. I think if someone hears you say, like, you have narcissistic traits, you're bad, like, that's the mistake. Because
I've never thought of him being a narcissist as an evil person.
Most people do.
I've never.
There's a negative connotation to it, but it doesn't mean you're evil. I mean,
like, think about it. What do we admire? Humble, selfless people, right? Which is obviously something to admire, right? So the opposite of that is self-focused, people that only worry about themselves. Like, that's not seen as a positive trait, right? It just isn't. But the truth is, a lot of successful people that have done a lot of good in the world also happen to have narcissistic qualities. Like, I would say that you'd be hard pressed to find the leader of a country in politics not having a specific number of narcissistic traits. Regardless of how good or bad that person is, you have to be somewhat narcissistic to think you, one person of 300 million, right, are the most qualified to run the entire country. Like, you have to. It's just comes with the job.
Okay, so, is Phil a narcissist, Daniel?
What's that?
Is Phil a narcissist?
He's going to get mad at me, but I think absolutely, based on textbook. Like I said, I love the guy, but if I look at, the definition and I read what the traits are that are typical, like, he smashes them. Like he's pretty.
So it's amazing. Like one of his closer friends, you, has said, and he says, "I'm not sure my biggest hater would call me that."
The one thing that he doesn't have. So narcissistics, people that are narcissistic typically lack the ability to empathize. They cannot show empathy. They don't do that, right? Phil does. He does. He is empathetic to other people. He does care about other people. He's kind to other people in those ways, and he shows empathy. So to be a pure narcissistic, you simply don't. Because when you're narcissistic, you see people as pawns. Or that's actually sociopathic. Pardon me, I got those.
Yeah, I think we're getting into deeper into the psychological realm, but I believe it's pathological narcissism that demonstrates a lack of empathy.
Right.
But we're starting to get above our pay grade. I think all three, all three of us.
Not Phil's wife's pay grade.
Not Phil's wife's pay grade, which is why we should have her on the show for the discussion. But I kind of agree. I mean, I've got it's. Yeah. Anyway, but my favorite part of the quote is the part that's in brackets, the part that he was in bed and he turned the lights back on so that he could write the tweet talking about can you just picture this image, close your eyes for a second and just picture Phil Hellmuth in bed with his wife about to go to sleep. It's been a long day. Turns on the phone one last time, sees a notification with his name on it. Obviously, he's got to open it up, click the link, and a poker writer. Honey, this guy, he called me a narcissist. Honey, can you believe this? Look at this. Hang on, I got to get on Twitter. And let's turn the lights on, get on Twitter, and then send the tweet, and then maybe read a few replies, and then go to bed feeling better. The mental image of that is just fantastic for somebody who's not at all narcissistic.
I think maybe he just doesn't understand what narcissistic means.
Maybe.
That's probably what happened there. But anyways, interesting, funny tweet. Roscoe, have you got a voicemail for us?
No.
Are you trolling him?
You don't. I was trolling Ross. All right. That's going to wrap it up for this week's show. We're going to get into some voicemails next time.
Yeah. I got my computer back after many repairs this week. And we'll be back. We'll be back.
Once again, sad that we lost one of poker's greatest champions and certainly greatest ambassadors. Have some thoughts for Mike's family this week. And thanks to you guys for getting together. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody out there for listening. We will talk to you soon.
I'm Mike Sexton saying thanks for watching. And until next time, may all your cards be live and your pots be monsters.